tribes believe that when the gods came down from the sky, they found human beings very, very stupid. And the human beings could not come before the gods in order to be taught. So what the gods did, and this is a story that you also find amongst the Dogoni people in West Africa, because the human beings were afraid of approaching these reptile gods. The reptile gods cold-bloodedly slaughtered one of their number and shed out its flesh with a specially gathered crowd of human beings. And these human beings then became the ancestors of our first great kings. Now say, African kings jealously guarded their blood.
If the royal lines of Africa claim descendants from the same source, basically, have those lines interbred as obsessively as the European aristocracy and royal family, and not bred outside of those lines?
Yes, sir. Royalty had to marry royalty. That was one of the strictest laws in ancient times.
Which is obviously where we get the term, the divine right of kings from. It's not actually God, it's actually the gods.
Yes, sir, yes. Royalty intermarried with royalty. You were not allowed to take a commoner as your senior wife if you were a king. You could take commoners after your senior wife.
Once the genetics has been achieved.
Yes, sir. Now, another thing, it is like the Sangomas. Very, very strictly speaking, a Sangoma who was sometimes viewed as a king or a queen was not allowed to marry outside her caste or his caste. Sangoma had to marry Sangoma, otherwise the non-Sangoma blood would pollute the god blood inside the Sangoma.
The lady that I've quoted in my books, Cathy O'Brien, who wrote her own book, Transformation of America, about being a mind-controlled slave of the American elite, she talks in there about seeing George Bush as president and vice president shapeshift into a reptile. And so many other people have told me this story of world leaders today changing into reptiles in front of their eyes and then changing back again. And Miguel de la Madrid, the president of Mexico at the time of George Bush, said to Cathy O'Brien, as she quotes in her book, that a reptilian extraterrestrial race interbred with the ancient Central American people because they needed to create bloodlines through which they could operate.
Yes.
And he said that these bloodlines were, in effect, today's world leaders. Does it fit with your knowledge, CREDO, that the royal lines of the Chitahuli reptilian human interbreeding that become the demigods and the royal families, etc., that they have gone on in Africa, as well as the rest of the world, to become the ruling lines and the ruling people of these countries?
Yes, many of them have. In fact, some of Africa's most terrible warmongers, men who have drenched large areas of Africa in unnecessary blood and suffering, are directly descended from some of our greatest emperors of 600, 500, or even 1,000 years ago.
Just as the American presidents are.
Say, I would like to tell you about a man called Jonas Savimbi. Jonas Savimbi is a descendant of some of the greatest Angola kings. In fact, the entire land called Angola was a breeding place of kingship in Africa. The word Ngola means a king, and Angola means land of many kings.
I must say, the way that the evidence that I'm uncovering is going, and it's going there very fast, and it syncs so much with what you're saying, is that a race from the stars, a reptilian race, interbred with humanity, they created crossbreed bloodlines, which became the middlemen, the demigods, the royal kings and lines and ruling power in the ancient world, and through interbreeding have become the presidents, the ruling people at the top of the power structures of banking, of politics, of the military, of all areas of our lives, of business, all of it. Is that the way that you have seen it yourself?
Yes, sir. You know, Mr. Ike, I wish for one moment I could contradict you. But for the last 40 years, I have observed an extremely disconcerting phenomenon in South Africa and in other parts of Africa as well. And this is the phenomenon. You find a rising black leader, a real leader amongst men, a ferocious activist for the rights of his people. This man starts something, whether it's a revolution or whatever, he starts it. And you look at his ancestry, because in Africa we look very closely at a man's ancestry. And you find that this man is nothing. Although he is doing such great deeds, he is actually a descendant of very peasant people. And you are worried. And all of a sudden, this black man will come to a sudden violent end, and a person who is totally new will take his place. And when you look at the ancestors of these people, this man, you find that he, or even she, is a person of very, very ancient African royalty. Now, let me show you. There was this war in Rhodesia, and many people got killed there. And there was a very fierce and dedicated general. His name was Tongogara. And Tongogara fought in Rhodesia. And just when victory was won, Tongogara was killed in a terrific explosion. Somebody put a bomb thing in his car and killed him very badly. But wait, Tongogara had been a descendant of a blacksmith. His surname, Tongo Gara, means powerful hammer. Now, who replaced Tongogara? A man called Robert Mugabe. Now, you can't get more royal than that. Mugabe is descended from ancient Mashona kings, and what is more, he knows it. Always a leader is removed, and when the power really comes,